Okay, so we are doing function notation, and we're going to talk about what that looks like and what that means here first. So what does function notation look like? Function notation is when you have that f of x equals a problem. So we're just going to make an example problem. So that is function notation. Okay, it doesn't have to be f though. You could have g of x, you could have h of x, you can have any letter of the alphabet in front. Okay, that's an h, not an n. Now, how do we read that? F of x, g of x, so on and so forth. And what does it mean? It tells you it is a function. F of x also just means y, or g of x, or h of x, or whatever combination of that it is. It's just another way of saying y, except it's specifying that it is already a function. So if I asked you, is this a function, do you even have to look? No, because it's labeled a function, it should be a function. Okay, so the first two says write the following equations in function notation. Y'all, there's nothing fancy about it. Instead of y, you're just going to put f of x. Now, does it have to be f of x? No. Could we use g of x? Could we use any letter combination? J of x, whatever. Doesn't matter. Okay. Okay, so now we're going to get into actually finding function notation. Now I'm going to show y'all a couple different ways. I'm going to show you by hand, and when I say by hand, we're still using the calculator, so it's not like fully by hand. And then I'm going to show y'all straight through the calculator, because a lot of this can be done in the calculator unless there's a couple ways that they can't be done in the calculator, and I'll show you what that means. So if we look here, it says given f of x, g of x, and m of x with these equations, find the following. So you'll see I have 3 different letters because it's representing the 3 different equations. And you have to pay attention to the letter to know which equation you're looking at, yes? However, what happened? This says f of x. What does this say? F of negative 2. So what was replaced? With what? So guess what x equals? So I know x equals negative 2 because it's telling me x is negative 2. So if I look at the f equation, and instead of writing x, I'm going to replace it just like this did with negative 2. Always use parentheses when you're plugging it in. And then y'all from there, I can literally use my calculator, 3 parentheses negative 2 squared minus 5. Press enter. What does it equal? 7. So I know that f of negative 2 equals 7. And I know that I can also write this as negative 2 comma 7 because it's just a point. Any questions with that? Okay, so knowing that, I'm going to show you how you could do it in the calculator as well. When there's multiple that use the same equation, you can go to your y equals, and you can type it. So f of x is 3x squared minus 5. I don't like to write all of them in there. You could. Just make sure you know which one you put in y1, y2, y3, but it gets really confusing to me. So I like to do them one at a time. Okay, so I can press second graph. And which other one uses f? Well, this one has f of 2. So I'm going to go to positive 2. And what does it equal? 7. Any questions with that? So there's no more f equation, so now I can type the other equation in. And you can also do it, I say by hand, but not really, like you don't have to write that out. So we know that g of 3, well, so we know x is 3, right? But we can use this equation. So 4, and instead of 3, what am I going to, or instead of x, what am I going to put? 3. plus 1. So you don't even have to type in the y equals, especially if it's only like 1 or 2. You could just do it in the home screen. So what does that equal? 13. So we know g of 3 equals 13 because x was 3. And I can also write it as 3 comma 13. Oop, don't forget your parentheses. Any questions with that? So I can do it again for this one, g of 2. So 4, and instead of x, I'm going to put 2 plus 1, and it equals 9. So this is 7 over 9. However, this has two different functions, so I'm not going to write them as points because it has it as a fraction, and that would be weird, like a point over a point. Okay, so that's just 7/9. Okay, now the last one, I'm going to show you two different ways because I want you to understand how to get a fraction answer if you're given a fraction. So if you type this in, and just as an equation, because there's only one m, right? So you don't have to type the whole thing in y equals if you don't want to. You can do it straight to the home screen. Now, if I give you a fraction, I don't want a decimal answer. If you're given a fraction, I want a fraction answer. Yes? If I give you decimals, is it okay to give me a decimal answer? Yes. So whatever I give you is what I want in return. Unless it's a whole number, then it's just a whole number. Yes? So in this one, if you type it in your calculator as a fraction, guess what it's going to give you? A fraction. However, if you type it as just division or a decimal, guess what it's going to give you? A decimal. Okay? So 2/3 plus 5. My answer is just 3. Now, if you did this one in y equals, I'm going to show you negative 3x plus 5. Now, if you hit second graph, you'll see that all I have is whole numbers, but I want what? A fraction. So I can hit second window, and I'm looking, oh, it says, see how it says table start? Yes, that stands for table start. You can type whatever x value you want. So we could type 2 divide 3 and go to my table. Do you see how it's all decimals? Okay, but 2 divided by 3 is the one that's highlighted, which is 3, so we got the right answer. However, watch if I type it 2 alpha y equals enter 3. See how the line is a little bolder? That means you're typing it as a fraction. It doesn't make it an actual fraction because there's not enough space there. But now when I go to my table, see how they're all fractions? So your answers would have been a fraction too if it was a fraction answer. Does that make sense? So if you use that alpha y equals enter, you're going to get given a fraction. If you just use division, it's going to give you a decimal. Okay? Any questions with that? Or could you have just done them like that if it's a fraction? If you do it like this, it'll always give you the fraction. Cool? Okay. So knowing that, let's look at the next example. What do you notice about example 2? It's a graph, and there is no equation. So you can't even type this one in your calculator. You just have to know the graph. Okay, so knowing that, I want you to realize that we're given x, yes? So I'm looking at x, but are my answers x? No, I'm only looking at y for answers, yes? But x is telling me where to go to find that answer. And remember, y is height. So if I know that x is negative 2, I'm going to go left 2, and what's the height of my graph at that point? So 4 is your answer, which also can be written as negative 2 comma 4. Does that make sense? So let's look at another one if that doesn't make sense to you. This has x is a half. So from the center, I'm going to go side half between 0 and 1. And what's the height of the graph there? Did it go up or down? No, so it's just 0. Okay, last one, it tells me x is 2. That means I'm going to go over 2, and what's the height then? It went down 1, so it's negative 1. So you're just looking for the height when you're in that position of x. Okay, look at example 4. It says find g of 3. Okay, well, g of 3 means, what? Oh, g of 3 means that I'm given x equals 3, right? Well, which one has x is 3? The second one. And what's the y, which is my answer? 2. Pretty simple. So those are the 2 examples that you can't really use your calculator because it's all the information is given to you with no equation. Okay, now example 5 can be done in your calculator or by hand. And like I said, I say by hand very loosely. I mean like you plug it in on paper and you type it in your calculator. Okay, so not necessarily by hand. If I know that y equals f of x and that it is true that f of negative 5 equals negative 33. So that's true. That's a point. Determine whether it's true or false that this is your possible equation. Okay, so knowing that, what's y here? So f of x is negative 33 equals 7 times what's my x? Negative 5 minus 2. Well, if I type 7 times negative 5 minus 2, what does it give me? Negative 37. Are they equal? No, so this is false. Now, another way you could have done this is you could have gone to your y equals and typed your equation 7x minus 2. And when I go to my table, I look for negative 5. And does it equal negative 33? No, it equals negative 37 like I told you, so that's another way to prove that it's false. Yes? Any questions with that? Okay, so flip to the back. Okay, this is the last piece of this stuff. This is composition of functions. This is the only spot that this can get like a tiny bit confusing. Okay? It's not hard. It's the same stuff. It's just a twofer. Okay? You got 2 problems in one. Okay? So this is called composition of functions. So if you have a function f and g, and it looks like this. So it looks like an open dot in the middle. It's not the same thing as a closed dot. What does a closed dot mean? Yeah, it means multiply. We are not multiplying. We are doing compositions. So it is very, very different. There's no multiplication here. Yes? Unless the multiplication's in your problem, your equation. So knowing that, it's plugging it in. So this is another way of writing this. And a lot of times I will literally just take my pen and rewrite it over because that makes more sense to y'all's when it's double parentheses, like this. Okay? So if you have an open dot, I would just put parentheses and then realize the middle goes first. So we're working middle to out. Okay? So what it means is you technically plugged one equation into the other. Okay, which you could find the new equation and type that in your calculator, but that's even more confusing. So it's just, if you think of it as a twofer problem, then that makes more sense. So if we have the g of x equation, well, don't I have a g of negative 3 on the inside? So we need to figure out what g of negative 3. We're ignoring that outside f for right now. Okay? So g of negative 3, well, I can type that in my calculator on the home screen or in the y equals. So I have negative 3 squared minus 6. And what does it equal? 3. So I know this equals 3. Well, now I have my f of x equation because on the outside I have an f. So guess what? I'm about to do the exact same thing but with my new inside. So now I'm looking at the f equation, which is this. So 3 times, what's my inside number now? 3 plus 1. And what's my answer? 10. Do you see what I mean? Is it's a twofer problem. You had 2 problems in one. That's how you need to think of it. So again, ignore the outside. We're just looking at the inside. What's on my inside? F of what? F of 0. So we're going to plug that into my f equation. This is f. So 3 times 0 plus 1. And what does that equal? 1. So my new inside is 1. But what do I have on the outside? A g. So now I'm going to find g of 1. So g equation is this. So I have 1 squared minus 6. And what does it equal? Negative 5. Now, this is the same thing except it uses g twice. Do you think that matters? No. I mean, yeah, you're just going to make sure you use the g equation both times. Okay? So we're going to do the inside first. And we're going to figure out what's g of 2. So use my g equation. 2 squared minus 6. And what does it equal? Negative 2. So my new inside is negative 2. And I bring down my next letter. Well, it's just g again. So guess what? I'm about to do the exact same thing, but this time with negative 2. And what's the answer? So there's your answer. So the letters are very, very important, and the order of the letters are very, very important. Okay? So you have a practice. It's like a whole 8 problems. This is what you're working on. If you finish the practice, y'all, you should be finishing